Hello, everyone. I wanted to tune in today and just share a message surrounding magic and politics, actually, and kind of delve into some of the ways that there's an intersection between the way that we are governed and the way that we live our lives, and give it kind of a witchcrafty, magical context so that you can use those concepts in your practice as well. So I want to talk about democracy because I've been thinking about it a lot lately. Since the blue wave, something that I never thought I would see, a huge revolution in democracy as we know it, I've been thinking a lot about what it means to contribute to society politically, what politics are, the way that we govern and live in community, and the ways that when we zoom out and then zoom back in, we notice a lot of archetypes such as, rulers, leaders, followers, community, those that we care for and those that care for us. All of those archetypes are found at every level. And I think that understanding the ways that our rulers and our leaders also exist within us can be really valuable for practicing magic. Those of us that have a little experience with witchcraft might be familiar with something called the Three Folds Law. And there are different things like this in different practices. The Three Folds Law is a pretty common example of just the concept of balance, and that anything that you put out always comes back to you. So the actual law itself is originally a part of a spell, and it says that anything that you enact on another person magically will come back to you threefolds. So a personal example of this in my life, I did a spell to try to get this ex to start thinking about me more, and then I couldn't get him off my mind, right? And I attributed that example to the Three Folds Law because that's how it seemed to be acting out in my life. And so that is a magical example of the way, and there are so many more, of the ways that balance and justice are built into systems of magic. If you look at astrology, if you look at ancestor work, if you look at past lives, if you look at divination, pretty much any religion or spiritual discipline that you look into has a sense of kind of a divine cosmic justice. And so that is one of the ways that I have tied magic to democracy in a really powerful way for myself. The right for us to have the ability to vote for and have a decision-making power in the way that we are ruled and governed is a huge blessing from society that for a lot of human history we didn't really get, particularly when we were in smaller communities. I can see ways that we've kind of been traumatized by people that are in charge and people that are influencing our free will. And I think that free will is one of the most incredible concepts that we have to our disposal, or at our disposal as human beings. A lot of entities, if you research deities and entities and energies, you'll notice that a lot of them don't really have free will. They are kind of acting out the archetypes and the energies that were assigned to them, and sometimes those were assigned to them by history, or it's the way that they manifested. So it's really interesting to notice that free will also comes up in a lot of our religions, our mainstream religions, because it is really powerful for us to make the choice. And what we find in the most famous story of our ability to exercise the choice is that we want to eat the apple. We want the knowledge. We don't want the comfort. We want to know the nature of our world more than we want to sit around and eat chips and play video games, right? Unless we're in a state of fear or trauma or immobilized, which brings us to the shadow of democracy, which is propaganda. And propaganda is not just a function of democracy. Famously, it was a function of religion, actually, when the Pope in, I don't remember the year, early 1600s, founded a commission of people that would go out and essentially, there's no other word for it, fucking colonize and spread their religion. And one of the main aspects of the committees that were sent out by the Pope was to try to integrate the religion with the current culture. And I mean, now we have a lot of language around appropriation and colonization and erasure. But then those conversations weren't as well recorded as the religious conversations, right? History is written by the victors. And so now we can look back at one of these really early examples of propaganda and understand that it was being used for the gain of a religious system. And then now we also know that the religious system was really a political system with the mask of God on it. So understanding the historical context of this trauma that we experienced as human beings, and the Catholic Church, there we could do a whole fucking episode about the ways that we experience trauma at the hands of the Catholic Church and Christian religions in general, but that's really not useful. What is useful is understanding that those people were human, and the people that they dehumanized were also human. And at the time, there were a lot of supportive energies around spreading what they thought was the moral good. And so that is the way that faith and democracy are both weaponized, right? Really the only way to override our innate nature to be good and to spread light and to serve others and to help, the only way to override that is deception. And so propaganda, although I believe it's a pretty neutral energy, the way that it's been used in the past is not neutral. It's generally, even if you look at the definition, it means usually with like insidious intent or something like that. And so we look at the examples of propaganda in our past. I mean, even just as recently as, you see these American posters about planting victory gardens and contributing to your factory. And, there's a lot of really great Soviet propaganda art that's pretty cool looking. So we understand propaganda to be on both sides of the scale as far as free will. And then the other part is surrendering our consent to an ideology. And the way that politics and spirituality intersect in this way is that surrendering consent to something gives your power to that entity. And so if you study, consent and the laws of nature and magic, you kind of understand the power of your belief, which is one of the reasons, my conspiracy theorist brain believes that a lot of our faith and our magic being part of a personal power is hidden from us. Because if we did know our personal power, we would understand that sacrificing our consent to an ideology or to a person or to a false idol, we would understand the implications of that for the globe and for ourselves and for the spiritual health of the earth. And even, I believe in many dimensions, so every dimension is affected, and many entities are trying to feed on our free will because we have that ability. And so understanding the power of our free will is a huge part of participating in magic. And then, on the democracy side of the aisle, understanding that we have the right to contribute and the autonomy to contribute to how we are led, even in, I'm in America. It's like we're in a republic that's kind of disguised as a democracy, and there really isn't a lot of freedom when it comes to voting, and there's a lot of racism and voter oppression, and there are a lot of obstacles. But we can also look back to pretty recent history to the ways that propaganda and hiding information from the public have contributed to the place that we're in now. We really fucking fell for it, right? And so now these next generations have the ability, especially in the time of the internet, to equip themselves with the most important piece of the democracy puzzle, which is an educated citizenship. And the only way to prevent an educated citizenship is to confuse information, fill what would traditionally be objective data with a lot of propaganda. And so if we look in history, we know that governments and religious institutions influenced science, medical schools, colleges. Nothing about that has changed. And that doesn't mean that science is wrong. It doesn't mean that education is wrong. It doesn't mean that college is wrong. It means that on a global scale, people have the ability to manipulate global things. So if someone has a life that they're blessed with, where they are in a position of politics or of celebrity, then they have a sphere of influence that is much larger than ours. And so their ideology gets represented on a much larger scale. And so understanding the difference between that reality and a conspiracy theory that we don't really respect or want to believe can help us start to get out of this fog that we have surrounding our independence. We really do feel that we are independent, and I don't think that it's wrong to believe that, because I do think that human beings have individual autonomy. I do think we have a lot more rights and freedoms than a lot of places in the world, and that's a blessing. You know, I wouldn't be able to create and disseminate this content if it weren't for the blessings surrounding democracy and individuality and freedom. So I don't want to say that we don't have that. But what I do want to kind of impart to people who are practicing magic and also have a heart for justice and also want to find their purpose and find the ways that they can contribute to their world. You know, being comfortable and consuming more than we need is a really excellent way to pacify us. And so if we have our needs filled in such a way that we don't really notice when things are going wrong for other people, even in our community, but especially in the globe, we are sacrificing our consent in a way. And when we are trained, as we have been, to have our needs filled by institutions, corporations, and government, then we start to lose practice on the muscle of taking care of ourselves, taking care of our community, taking responsibility for our actions, and taking responsibility for the deaths that occur that we could prevent simply by living in a different way. And I think that during these times that we're in, for some context, we're in a pandemic right now, it's really important to remember that we are not helpless and that we have political and personal power, and the things that stop us are comfort and fear. And our true nature is to love and to serve and to take responsibility and protect. Those are things that human beings are capable of, that help save our species and help give us fulfillment and enjoyment in our life in a way that a lot of other entities cannot have. And that's a huge blessing of the third dimension. But the way that that true nature gets thwarted is through deception. And when we have, you know, I'm definitely not anti-technology, but when we have an augmented reality that we're living through, which I think is fun and exciting and cool, we have to take an extra layer of steps surrounding our personal responsibility about interpreting the information that comes in, understanding context about institutions and governments, understanding context about ourselves and human nature, like narcissism, self-reflection, mindfulness, telepathy, all of these things that are simply like archetypes or energies that sort of like exist in our world, exist on a human level. And so when we look at a leader that we don't respect or that we don't understand, the only way to battle that is with empathy and to understand the world that that leader grew up in and the world that that leader is perceiving. Because until we get on the same page about what their world is, we continue to see their actions as irrational. But if propaganda has taught us anything, it's that no evil villain thinks that they are the evil villain. You know, there were plenty of people in the Catholic Church that are exactly like the deep state right now, who were manipulative and who were trying to make money and who did have insidious intent. But in order for an organization or an institution or a government with that to thrive, there have to be people that are sacrificing their consent in order to enact the will of the evil. And because evil's only weapon is deception, those people are often deceived. And so having compassion and empathy for those people is a really huge part of understanding the battle that we're up against. I know that we really don't want to forgive colonizers, and we don't want to forgive people that are evil, and we don't want to forgive people that took so much from us spiritually, because now we're stuck watching fucking YouTube videos of 25-year-olds in their apartment instead of reading the massive amount of ancient information from the Library of Alexandria, right? And that's a hurt for us. We understand that there's an imbalance. And so when we confront our cognitive dissonance, and we confront the ways that our psychology can be hacked, we start to understand that some of it is our own doing. And a lot of it can literally be unlocked by our thoughts and our actions. And so I hope that having that context around the way that we're experiencing a spiritual change and a political change, I hope that that contributes to your practice in a really healthy way. I hope that you come to understand that fear can be your friend, and that this is not the end of the world. It's simply a lifting of the veil. And so I really encourage you to find out, if you want, through journaling or through contemplation, things that you defend, ideologies that you subscribe to, cognitive dissonances that you have within your individual life, your family life, your community life, your government life, your scientific life. All of these ideas that you have, it's really important to question them and to form a worldview that you can get behind. Because a lot of times when we start forming our worldview and we start putting puzzle pieces together to find out what it is we truly believe and how what we truly believe can inform our actions, that's when we start to stumble upon inconsistencies in the narrative, not only for ourselves and how we treat ourselves and talk to ourselves, but also for the ways that we're being manipulated by huge, institutions online and in our government. So I know it seems a little soapboxy, but it does feel important for the time, and it's been on my mind a lot lately. So I'd be very interested to learn maybe where you've landed after hearing that information, and how it can inform your practice and your political action, and the ways that politics and spirituality have intersected for you. I think would also be really interesting to hear. So I'm sending lots of love.